because there is this lack of joy, lack of connection, lack of purpose, lack of feeling gratitude, we experience in the US 120,000 deaths related to workplace-related anxiety every year. We're literally dying without joy.
She's an international keynote speaker and author of the book Joyosity, How to Cultivate Intense Happiness in Work and Life. We have the incredible Jenn Whitmer on the show.
So if the opposite of joy is toil, toil is work that feels meaningless. We want to be spending about 35% of our time doing things that are joyful, reducing or keeping toil down to what I call toil's tiny 10, keeping it under 10%. Joy isn't something that you have to earn. You are worthy of joy right now at this moment.
If someone doesn't feel that right now, how do we cultivate that?
It has 3 components to it. And the first component is...
Jenn, how should we be thinking about joy at work and in our lives? And what's at stake if it's missing in our workplace?
You know that feeling when everything is like, this is amazing. Like your team came together, the project worked, the client loved it, the outcomes were what you wanted. And that feeling should be normal to us. And it doesn't always happen when things are quote unquote successful, though. So the way I define joy, I have a really specific definition of joy, and it has 3, I would say, green flags. It has 3 components to it. And the first component is that you feel lucky or favored or fortunate. That feeling of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I get to do this. Like that feeling, almost guilty. Like, do they let me do this for work? And they pay me? Oh my gosh, like that feeling of joy. And the second part that is required for joy is that you have a sense of belonging. Like it connects you to other people and a group when you are doing it. And then the third is that the results impact more than just you. It has a connection to a deeper purpose. And Jade Simmons, I cannot improve on her definition of purpose, which is purpose isn't what you do, it's what happens in other people when you do what you do. So that feeling of, oh my gosh, we did it, it's great, I turned that in, or whatever that is at the end, where you feel connected, you feel lucky, and you feel like this is helping people, that is the experience of joy. So when we think about joy like that, I am sure, like if you are listening and you're driving, don't close your eyes. But if you're listening and you think about that moment, where do you feel that? Because that is a physical sensation, but it is also this ripple effect in our lives. So it's not just that one moment where you feel it. It's also the continuation of joy that extends into the rest of your work. It extends into your commute home. It extends into the little league game that you played at the dinner table. All of those things are connected because you are one whole person living one whole continuous life. So while those markers of joy that I've just described at work, they also are the markers of joy in every place. And the way we think about joy at work really matters because some people think it's this like fleeting moment of fun, which believe me, I am all for fun. Like I love fun, but joy isn't, an ice cream sundae bar or, we got a pool table for the break room. That's fun, but joy is so much deeper than that. So when we're thinking about joy at work, that framing is the part that's really important. And what it does, if you frame it in that way, all of the research is phenomenal about how it impacts us. And I think another picture that might be helpful is sometimes when people think about joy as like balloons or cotton candy, that kind of thing, those things are very temporary and they don't sustain you. A balloon pops, it floats away, it deflates, cotton candy melts on your tongue. But if you replace that image of joy as lavender is rooted. It has this real staying power. It does really well when all the other plants fail because of drought. Lavender's still going. It's kind of wild, even if you plant it in rows. And one of the things about lavender that most people aren't aware of because we think of it as like this scent that we get, at Home Goods, but it's this deep rooted plant that its roots are as deep as the plant is tall or the tree is tall, depending on what kind of variety. And that image of rootedness, of flourishing, of something that is sustaining you even through difficult times because it grows in rocky, hilly soil that has like a bite of acid in it. That kind of image is what I want people to think of as joy. So if you have these 3 markers and you pair that with this deeply rooted lavender, that is how we should be thinking about joy.
So then if it's missing, if it's not there within a work setting or in our own lives as well, what's at stake then?
So the statistics that I'm going to rattle off are from the last 3-ish years, and they are sobering. So in workplace statistics, when we have the absence of joy, what happens is that anxiety increases, miscommunication starts to increase, lack of clarity increases, and then miscommunication happens as well, and anxiety starts to follow. And about 87% of US workers experience workplace-related anxiety that they would classify as intense. And of that group, 3 out of 4 say it significantly impacts their home life. So that horrible meeting that you had and that sinking gut feeling comes home when you're trying to, set the table, you're trying to get a kid to practice. And all of that is happening when you're talking to your mom on the phone. It's starting to impact those other relationships because while boundaries are really important, you cannot separate yourself from you. And so that anxiety travels with you. And then in addition to that, around the world, 71% of people say that they are experiencing intense workplace-related anxiety. So while it is stronger in the US, the rest of the world is not far behind. And so much so that 80% of workers in the fall of 25 said that they are experiencing a toxic workplace. 80%. And that is up 13% from the year before. So I know that was a lot of numbers, but the thing that ultimately starts to happen when our health breaks down, when anxiety increases, when depression-related absenteeism spikes, because there is this lack of joy, lack of connection, lack of purpose, lack of feeling gratitude, we experience in the US 120,000 deaths related to workplace-related anxiety every year. So we're literally dying without lack of joy.
It sounds like there is multiple aspects to joy then. Because you just said like there's purpose in there. I heard there's a sense of fulfillment in there. There's happiness in there. There's so many different aspects to that. Do you see them as, I guess, separate pieces that bring and enable for the joy to actually occur? Or are they all one cohesive unit?
They come together under this experience of joy, is what I like to call it, because we have the emotion of joy. It's one of our core root emotions of joy. Happiness happens. It is more fleeting. It is more
what is the
momentary.
difference?
Yeah. So joy, as I said, is this really rooted, vulnerable emotion that is tied to your purpose of who you are. And that's why it's one of the most vulnerable things of like, this is what I really love. This is what I want to be doing. And sometimes we're embarrassed about that because we don't know what people are going to think. And that's why it feels so vulnerable. So joy is rarely, when people say pure joy, that rarely happens because there's all these other things happening at the same time. So that's that rootedness of joy that will sustain you, even if circumstances aren't great. Because you can still experience purpose, a sense of belonging, and a feeling of gratitude, even when things aren't amazing. It's like that sustaining power of joy. Happiness tends to flow in and out. You can have happiness in parts of your day, like, oh, this coffee was great that I had, before I came over here. Or this feeling of, I found a parking spot, those little moments that we can call joy. But if they're not connecting us to other people, if they're not connected to purpose, if we don't feel really lucky, if all those 3 things aren't happening, it's not really about the joy. So while those other moments or other components are a part of joy, we're experiencing joy when those 3 things are happening, when we're having this deep sense of connection and gratitude and connected to something greater than ourselves.
So if someone doesn't feel that right now, how do we cultivate that?
Yeah. Well, I love this question because you use the word cultivate, and that's the word that I use all the time, because joy isn't something that you have to earn. You don't earn it. You are worthy of joy right now at this moment. And Edward Deming, who is a famous organizational expert in the business world, says that people are entitled to joy at their work, which really gets some people's hackles up. So, but cultivate is something that you can do to increase joy, to work for it, because you do have to understand things and work for it and design your life for joy in order to experience it at the levels that make meaningful impact at work. So I have talked about the joy ratio, because we can't be happy all day, every day. Like we would literally, our bodies can't handle that level of intensity. And we live in a world where it's not perfect. I mean, it's foolish to think that we can be happy all day, every day. And so we have to like, well, what's the rest of life then? If we've got a ratio, there's more components to it. So we've got joy and the opposite of joy, which is toil. So if the opposite of joy is toil, toil is work that feels meaningless. It's boring. It doesn't interest you. You feel lonely when you do it. It also feels disconnected from people and things that you love. It could be something that you're doing that you enjoy, but you're not resourced enough to do it well. So, you know, if graphic designers are such a great example, because they're like, oh, we need this amazing design in 2 hours. Well, you can do an amazing design and you can put something good up in 2 hours, but that is not the joyful way of working. It's the resources aren't there to get it done. The time resource or the money resource or the people resource isn't there, the space to do it. So those things are a part of toil. So when we put that into the joy ratio, we want to be spending about 35% of our time doing things that are joyful with those 3 green flags, and about 10% of our time reducing or keeping toil down to what I call toil's tiny 10. Like keeping it under 10%. And if we live in that ratio, we get the benefits of joy at work that we haven't quite talked about, but we also start to reduce all of those horrible statistics that we did talk about, the impact of great anxiety, miscommunication, errors, lack of performance, all of that. So that ratio is really important into the way we spend our lives, because we can't be happy all day, every day. Toil will always be with us. There will always be jobs that you don't want to do. For me, it's always a spreadsheet. If it involves a spreadsheet, I usually don't want to do it. So those parts of your life exist because those are things that need to happen in order to make life living and doing work done well. But we don't want them to take over. And that toil's tiny 10 is really important. And if you're out there doing math, I'm sure you're like, but wait, there's a big chunk in the middle. And that's 55. And so that 55, I like to call the messy middle. The messy middle are just the hard conversations that you have to have with people. They are the things that are just everyday, mundane things that aren't necessarily toil. They're not incredibly taxing. They don't drain you, but they're not necessarily the things that are always bringing you joy. And that part, when you're talking about the components, those are all the skills that we use to engage with other people, the people power skills, the habits that we live our lives by. If we do that messy middle well, that's actually part of keeping toil down to 10, because that messy middle can grow to toil really quickly.
I find it really interesting because one of the things, as you were sharing, was around discipline. And the different aspects of this. Okay, within joy, we have the messy middle, we have toil. And from a discipline standpoint, because at some point, there's certain things that you're going to have to do that you don't necessarily feel like doing. And when it comes to discipline, because it's important to be disciplined in the things that you're doing, it's important to be able to execute on the things that you don't necessarily feel like doing. And when we're joyful, it seems that this would be an easy thing to execute on because, I can be as disciplined as I like, right? But the messy middle and the toil is then I like to think about it as like doing what's required rather than what you feel like in a certain moment, because there are those moments, those times. And so that discipline, I could see them being within the messy middle being a really important piece where if you then don't execute in the messy middle, then that is going to spill over very quickly into the toil.
Absolutely.
And there was something I thought about just over the last probably month or two of how are you executing in a way today that your future self will be really, really happy that you did, where you made your future self's life easier. And I don't mean like a year's time or 5 years' time, but like this afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
Or in a week's time, for example. Like, what are you doing now that would result in your future self saying, thank you, you made my life a little easier. You know, my life is a little better as a result of that. And it enables the future version of self to maybe have a little more of that experience of joy, the experience of fulfillment there, because we've done the things that were needed in those moments. So how do you think about discipline in these three areas, and things like discipline, things like mental toughness, things the areas that, require a bit of grit?
Well, so here's my thing. Like my immediate thing is like, oh, discipline. Oh, and I know a lot of people are like that. And there's an ancient book that talks about discipline is painful in the moment, but produces a harvest of righteousness and joy. And so if goodness and joy come out of discipline, how do I hack myself to get out of that initial response?
Yeah.
And I'm sure lots of people who listen to you are very disciplined people because you talk about that. And also they might possibly have this like part of it. And so the way that you're talking about that is, what can I do that in the future that will help me? My language around that is, what does my favorite self want to do? So I like best self, but what is my favorite self? When I am at my best, when I really like myself in this way, how am I behaving? What am I doing? And then the other way that I think about that in the moment when we need to create, you just got to do the thing, is what is best ultimately? Like, what is the ultimate thing that I want? I actually want this thing more than I want to sleep right now or to do right now. And sometimes it is the flip of that. Sometimes it is, I actually need to sleep because that is ultimately what is better for me than doing this thing right now. We don't talk about that very often, but that way of considering what is my favorite self want? What is my future self going to thank me for? I talk future Jenn. Future Jenn is really easy to get to. She helps present Jenn be present. But how do we think about it in that way? That is one way to get yourself there in the moment. And that works sometimes. Eventually it will fail you because motivation goes away. Like you just can't get her done all the time. And that's why rituals and rhythms are what I call that. Lots of people call it discipline, habits, and routine. Those feel restrictive to me. And so I like to talk about it like rituals and rhythms and structures in your life that support you in two ways. One, when life just takes you out, like it just takes you out at the knees. And my dad has recently had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. My parents don't live in the same city that I live in. We have 4 kids. 2 of them are in college. 1 just graduated. We've got 1 that's in high school that's learning to drive. We don't have enough cars for all the people. I lost a really big contract this year because of the economic situation. And that's just like a little bit. Like life can take you out. And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, poor me, but like, I'm sure you recognize yourself in that life will take you out at some points. And what you need in those moments, because motivation isn't going to get it. So you have to build the rhythms and the rituals that help you answer the question, well, what does my favorite self want? When the moment when you just don't want to do it, you've developed that in such a way that it's muscle memory. So about 4 years ago, I have always been an active person, but the pandemic just was insane for us as a family of 6. Like we were all together at home. And I just needed to get out. And my health had suffered from all kinds of different things. And I just started, I'm going to do something every day. I'm just going to move my body. It doesn't need to be for any other purpose other than it is good to, my body is meant to move. I'm going to move my body. And I'm on like almost to a 1,500 day streak of moving. And now I don't have to think about, am I going to go move my body today? I will get it done at 11 o'clock at night because you better believe those rings are closing because it is motivating to me. That's how I motivated myself. But now it is so much a part of who I am. It is part of my daily rhythm that I don't think about how am I going to skip that? I think if I can't skip that, how do I get that done today? So the rhythms and the rituals have to be paired with that. What is my favorite self going to thank me for in the future?
What I love about that is that it's gone from it being something that you do to being something that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're able to shift that over from, this is something that I'm doing, it's an action that I'm taking, to no, this is who I am. And it's like, right, rain, hail, or shine, it's going to get done.
Right.
And so for someone then who's listening to this, who's struggling to put the rhythms in place, maybe they're struggling with procrastination, they don't have the joy or the fulfillment, the purpose, the connection, any of these things in place right now, where do they start?
Yeah. Well, there's a few different starting points. So you can get into this in a few different ways. And I think for our conversation, talking about joy as this big umbrella idea, I use what I call the Joyosity Explorer Map. When I'm working with clients, this is a great place to start because it's super fast when you're doing it on your own. And we can dig into more, obviously, when I'm working with clients. But write down a list of things that bring you joy. What has these three qualities? Maybe it doesn't have all three, it has two of the three, or you just feel so lucky when you get to do it. You're like, I just love to look at the birds. Like, I just feel so connected, like I belong as part of the earth when I'm great. Write it down. Just make a brainstorm list and don't edit. Don't feel like, well, you can feel this way, but don't stop yourself because you feel like, people are going to think this is dumb. Right. Like, I could listen to every musical not every musical. I've got some I hate, but like I can listen to musicals all day long. I want my life to be a musical. Like, I love it so much. And lots of people think that that's foolish or silly. I am a full-on Disney adult. I love Disneyland, and I have lots of serious reasons why I love Disneyland, but I also just really love the Matterhorn. And so, like, write those things down, from the big, the little, the parts of your job. I love writing keynotes. I love giving keynotes. I love wordsmithing. How is that mic drop moment going to land? Like, I'm sitting there on pen and paper with my Post-it notes, and those are things I love. Write those down for yourself. No matter how nerdy you think it is, write it down, because you can't figure out, well, what does my favorite self want or need if you don't think about what that is. So that's the place to start. And then the toil. So write the same things down. What are the things, like, if I could delegate that this second, I would. If I never had to do it again, what are the parts of your job that you're like, sayonara, I do not want to see you again, as much as the parts of my job, like, I don't ever want that to go away. Once you have that list together, then you can start, well, what are the things that bring me more joy? How do I get there? I can't rearrange my life to start building any kind of habit or rhythm or ritual that brings me joy and reduces toil if I don't know what those things are. So that's where I help people start. And when I work with them for longer periods of time, then we get into values and a values operating system, and then building that into your decision-making and the structures of your life. But the first place to start that is low-hanging fruit is just a list of what brings you joy and what is toil and drains you.
So as people make that list, then if there ends up being some things on there that it's maybe a bit of an eye opener, or maybe they've known deep down, but putting it out on a paper, writing that down, it's okay, there's nowhere to hide now. How does someone go about making those decisions? They could be big moments, because it could be whether to move on from a job or move on from a relationship or some other life decision that they have to make. How do you go about thinking about that?
Well, that's where values become really important, because there are things that might bring you happiness, but values are always going to be connected to your joy, because it's about purpose. Like, what am I doing in my life? So when you're first starting out, you first have to give yourself permission that it's okay for you to want. Like, lots of people are like, well, I shouldn't want that, or I can't want that.
Where does that come from for folks?
Oh, there are so many messages about that. I think particularly women, because we're supposed to be like the human giver to everybody else. That happens a lot. I don't think men don't experience that, but I think it is a particularly intense message to women. And I think there is this message that says, you should just be happy you got a job. You should just do it. You're not here to, work doesn't fulfill you. And I agree that work cannot be the only thing that brings fulfillment in your life. But if we spend at least a third of our time working, shouldn't it be somewhat fulfilling? We're designed to work. Even people who don't work have tasks. You still work. We still produce. We still create. And so what are those parts of work that you like? You can get to like your work. And so I think the messaging of you're just here to earn money, you're just here to serve the company, you're just here to do the thing, those types of messages are what get in our heads. And the big idea that you shouldn't want things is so weird. And I think it is this flip on, if we have more of us who are doing the things that we want and we're passionate about that are tied to this ideal values-based self, we are more productive. You are 33% more productive, or 31% more productive when you are experiencing joy. And if everybody was doing the thing that brought them joy, we would be so much more productive, which is this big idea in the business world that we always want to be more productive. And so those messages, I think, are misplaced, but they are embedded so deeply into our society. I wrote a lot in the book. I even have footnotes because I was like, these are some of these places where we get these messages from. And so starting out with, it's okay for you to want this, is a really important mindset shift to then start asking for things that you want, to start saying, I don't want to do this thing. And then you can start shaping to do more of the things that you do want and less of the things you don't.
Let's talk about within a workplace then. And let's go with the person that is leading. So whether they are a CEO or a senior leader or someone that has a team of people. And on the other side of that, someone who is being led by people.
Mm-hmm.
And on the leader side, how can we cultivate more of that within the teams that we're leading? Yeah. And then if the person who is in a team and there is, say, it's a toxic culture or they're not experiencing what they want,
right,
but they don't necessarily have the opportunity just to pick up and leave necessarily.
Right. Mm-hmm.
How does someone build and cultivate more joy in those environments to create a more hospitable environment?
Yeah. I'm going to start with actually the employee or team member, because every leader has to do that for themselves first, because you can't lead anybody else until you lead yourself. Like, you are CEO of your own desk. So it doesn't matter what title you hold, you have to lead yourself. Then we'll talk about the leader. So no matter the circumstances around you, if you start trying to build in the healthy rhythms and rituals and structures into your life, the skills that help you with emotional control and communication and understanding your personality and your values and your mental storytelling, all of that work, those practices will start to hold you when the toxicity is coming at you. And there are times where you can't leave. And I had a client where it was bad. And so he was a senior director. So he had a lot of responsibility, but not the top decision maker. And we had worked together for a little while. And basically he was promised this great strategy role. That was what was happening. And at first, this place was amazing. Everything is great. And then about 6 months in, there were a few like, I don't know about this. But during that time, we had been working on setting up these good rhythms. We've talked about his values, tying those to decision making. He had made this great flourishing team for himself, but he still wasn't getting to do the strategy work that he'd really been brought in to do. And then a couple whammies kind of hit the company. So one of them was a market collapse of their particular industry, and then some regulatory pressure that came at the same time. So as often happens, when pressures come, people revert. And so the CEO just started kind of flailing and making decisions outside of their process, trying to just kind of appease the board, trying to get the regulatory things together. All of that was starting to happen. And basically things started to run downhill. There were meetings that he was left out of. There were meetings that he was a part of. And then the CEO would just change decisions. There was a lot of that started backbiting, some gossip. I mean, all of it just started to really happen. And all of these things that we had set up and helping him with his values and his rhythms. It was just like he had to do all of those things just to keep his nose above water because he couldn't leave. He had 3 young kids. His wife did not work. And so she was making just keeping things together at home. And he was the only income, the only insurance. I mean, that is so much pressure. Yeah. And so even just literal daily walks, trying to, at the end of the day, what were the things that I did actually accomplish today that I know that I did, because gaslighting was such a thing you didn't do that. And he's like, no, I did literally do those things. I mean, it was just to tread water. And so while the toil was so high, he had to also find other places to have joy. He was out of whack in the joy ratio, but he was doing everything he could to maintain what you can. So when you're in that super toxic place, I have also experienced that awful toxic place. Is actually why I do what I do. You sometimes have to just hang on to the healthy things so you make it through. But that's what I mean by joy will hold you. When you find these things, these moments of this is where my joy is coming from. This is the purpose, regardless of what this other vice president is saying, what this CEO is doing. This is my purpose, and it's impacting people in this way. Kind of tying your work to that is the way you come back to that.
So I guess a question I've got is sticking with the employee, and then we can move on to the leader in a moment. If someone is in that experience, how do we go about compartmentalizing those challenging moments so that then it doesn't rub off into, say, our families or into our own mental health, and in a way where we almost package that away. It's like, okay, this is happening. I'm going to deal with that. And I utilize, by the sounds of what you're sharing, you're utilizing these other aspects to have the capacity to deal with that situation. But ideally, we're not wanting that to seep over into the areas of our lives. So how do we do that?
Well, in some ways that's not possible. And in other ways it is. Right. And that idea, again, you live one whole continuous life. The idea is that you do as best you can to process and release what's happening and set boundaries around it.
How do you do that?
There's so many different ways. I'm trying to figure out the most easiest way to talk about it. I think one of the most underrated ways to deal with that is actually just allowing your emotions to be their emotions. I am somebody whom if it's not a happy emotion, I don't want to deal with it. Now, I have learned how to do that. But honestly, name, rate, find. Name the emotion. Recognize the reality of the situation. This was horrible. I felt disregarded. I felt shame. I felt whatever it was. Name the things that you felt and then rate them by their intensity at a scale of 1 to 10. Some people like colors. I like 1 to 10. But how intensely are you feeling this emotion? And then find it in your body. There are some predictable places that emotions show up in your body, but we are not just heads walking around thinking. We have emotions and they appear. Usually fear is in your belly. Anger is up higher in your chest. Recognizing that, I think name, rate, find is one of the most underrated ways to process and have this emotional literacy about yourself that recognizes what happened and then allow it to be, because emotions are meant to pass through us. So when you have that intense meeting and you had the next intense meeting and then you piled on, and now it's 4:00, if you can take some time to name, rate, find, and then to physically get it out, star jumps, running up and down the stairs, even microbursts. Jenny Evans is a friend of mine. She's a stress nervous system expert, talks about these microbursts of activity. Because that is what processes the chemicals of emotions through your body. I think those things feel foolish to us because we're why can't I just get it together? That's how you get it together. And that's how you don't explode on somebody else, because that meeting that piled on the meeting, and then your own stress, and then you didn't recognize any of that as real. And then you come home and you stub your toe and your child you step on a Lego. Oh my God. You explode. If you can let those emotions come out and you can come home and it was awful. But now those emotions are now at a 5, even though that's kind of high, middle high, they're not at a 9 anymore. You're not going to bleed all over people who didn't cut you. And you have the opportunity to bring it down. Now, there are times I have experienced this. My husband has experienced this. I've had clients who've experienced this where it just never gets all the way down because the intensity of it is so great. You might need some therapy. You might need some psychiatry. You might need some medication. You might need to leave. But until that happens, that's when I think one of the most underrated ways of managing those emotions so it doesn't come home as intense, at least, and you're able to then absorb a different energy. And sometimes it's really helpful if you have a partner or you have a family to just say, today was really hard and I got about 20% left to give today. I want to give you all of my 20%, but that's all I've got. Being that transparent with your family, it can be challenging. People are like, oh, I don't want my kids to experience that. But if you want your kids to see reality, I don't think you should explode on them, but also know that some days are really hard so they don't grow up and like are shocked when they have a hard day.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
You're showing them how to be real.
Mm-hmm.
You're showing them how to be vulnerable. You're showing them that it's okay to feel those things.
Yes. I mean, we were sitting on our back deck and we like to eat outside and even in Missouri heat. But like, so we're sitting outside and our oldest son came and he was sitting and he started, I was like, he was just kind of starting to complain and I had had a hard day. He just wasn't there for the talking about it. And I said, I just need you to know that I got just very little left. And he's like, well, me too. And I was like, great, we probably shouldn't talk. And he's like, okay. And that was
That's
fine.
so good. That is so good.
And that was fine. Now we have established that in our family. He's in his early 20s. I'm 50, like we've practiced that, but that's okay. It's very real that things spill over, but that's how you contain it in an appropriate way. You don't like shove it down. I'm not going to deal with this and put it in this like little Tupperware box, like, in Atlanta's cave. You allow it to be what it is. You set it down and then you start to interact with the other parts of your people and the other parts of your life that will hopefully fill you up. Some days they don't. And then you're just honest about that. Not that you're not honest the other days, but
there's real value in communication there, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to be open with that, being able to have candid conversations and to be okay with not being okay in certain moments. And it reminds me of an experience that I had a number of years ago. I was back living in Australia at the time, and just this notion of emotions being able to flow through us rather than get stuck in us.
Mm-hmm.
And that as humans, we tend to think one of our greatest assets is our ability to think.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our greatest liabilities is our ability to think.
Amen.
Right? And there was this moment that I had. I was living in Adelaide at the time, and once a month I would go up to the Adelaide Hills and I'd get a massage. And it was I'm still yet to find a massage person that is able just to give that great a deep tissue massage. Oh my gosh, amazing. And so on this day, went up there once a month, I'd do it. And on the way back, there's this little town, idyllic town in the hills called Stirling. And Stirling is this picturesque kind of place. There's, lined trees up in the main street. When you go off a little bit, there's this little lake. And not many people must know about it because there's not usually many people there. There's more animals usually there. Sometimes you'll see some kangaroos. Most of the time it's just like ducks and other water birds. And on this day, I'm walking around the lake and just go, all right, just a beautiful day to wind down after getting a great massage. And I start walking around the lake and these two birds start fighting each other. And I did what any sane person would do.
Oh, no.
I got my phone out and I started recording it. Right?
Okay.
And the reason for that is that I didn't split them up and go, you go and talk about, think about this and you go think about that. Come on, get yourselves together. No, because I'd heard this example of these birds fighting, it's somewhere I'd heard it before. And I go, oh, this is it actually in real life. Like it's actually happening. So they start fighting each other. Well, then the craziest thing happens. Another bird comes in. Then there's 2 against 1. And then another bird comes in and it's 2 against 2.
There's gangs.
And so, yeah, it's a gang. I think about it in my mind of like, it's 2 couples like going at it. And like one of them's going, don't you say that about my wife, right? And so they go and I've got, it's about a 2.5 minute video. I've still got the video.
I love it.
And there's two birds fighting here. The other two are over here. They've gone way out into the lake and they're just going like crazy for a couple of minutes until eventually the victory is there. There's a victory that's done and there's this call out of like a really high pitched kind of sound. And it's like, okay, the victory's done. And I'm like, oh, this is the moment I've been waiting for. Right. So I've got the video. And like clockwork, every single one of those birds in the water got out a little bit and went like this. And then floated on their merry way.
Yeah.
This was releasing.
Exactly.
It was the releasing of, this is a very natural thing to experience, is that we experience the anger like the birds did, right? We experience the, don't you say that about that person, right? And there is the noticing of it. Now, they won't necessarily have the conscious awareness of it like we do. But that, again, becomes the greatest asset is our ability to think, and greatest liability maybe is our ability to think. Because the way that most of us would think about that afterwards would be walking away going, oh, you wait till I go get, I'm going to tell this person, and you wait till I go get this. And all of a sudden it becomes this whole thing that doesn't even exist anymore.
Yes.
It doesn't even exist anymore. And it ends up being completely wasted energy and wasted time. Things that could have been dealt with previously.
Yeah.
And so I just, as you were sharing that, I go, oh yeah, that's a perfect example of that in action.
Absolutely.
It's very natural to experience that.
Yeah. And there are, the Nagassi sisters wrote this amazing book. They're both doctors, and they wrote a book called Burnout. And if you've read this book, it's amazing. But they talk a lot about the stress cycle, which is a phenomenon in our bodies, that stress, we are not designed to stay at high stress levels or stay at homeostasis. Yeah. We're designed to go up and down and up and down. And the way we go up and down is these things that we're talking about. One is this intense physical activity, the running up and down the stairs. I like to do star jumps because I used to teach kindergarten through 8th grade and be like, I'm a star. And it's way better than burpees. Some people love burpees. Like just some kind of intense physical activity that gets your heart pumping and gets those things out, which is what those birds did there. The flap, the release. There is crying. I mean, the big old ugly cry is a great release, and you can't do it for a long time. Like your physical body can't. So it's like not usually longer than 5 minutes. Like but that release that happens. The next best, another thing is, it's not necessarily the next best, but another one is a big old belly laugh. Like just start laughing. It is one of the things that I love. I am by nature a big laugher, but I also know that laughter produces not only the endorphins and the dopamine that we all like, but it is the release. It is like the cousin of the big ugly cry, or like the flip of the coin of a big ugly cry. It does the same releasing. And if you can't get yourself to cry, you can actually get yourself to laugh. If you just start laughing, and we're like, you start laughing at yourself for being ridiculous, but then you also genuinely start laughing, and you get the same release. So you've this intense physical activity, big ugly cry, the belly laugh. If you go to talk to somebody else, that feeling of connection, and it doesn't even have to be like all of the things that you got out. I mean, the lady at the grocery store, the teenager bagging your groceries, how's it doing? Actually, it's been kind of a crappy day. How's your day been? And they, oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, it's just I had these, but that just gets it out. This connection with other people gets it out. Then there is this physical touch, which is not possible for everybody at work. I mean, maybe you've got a good friend you can hug at work, or maybe you've got somebody at home you can hug. Temple Grandin talked about this, is why she made that squeezy machine, but also a pet. If you can just sit and pet your pet for like 10 minutes, it does the same thing. Starts to release these emotions. A creative outlet is something that is phenomenal to do. I think we don't talk about that nearly enough because we gotta monetize the side hustle all the time, rather than I just like to draw, or I just like to sing. I like to sit at the piano. I like to pick up my viola. I like to do these things. And the other one is just breathing, just literal breath. Those things of our physical body start to release the stress. So you close the stress cycle, you come back to homeostasis as best you can, and some days that's enough. That's all we needed. You're not necessarily in that toxic workplace, but if 80% of us are, you got a lot of days where you may need to do that more often during the day and not just wait to the end of the day. But all of those things, like these birds that know instinctually to flap their arms. And sometimes, don't you want to flap your arms at people? I mean, I do. But allow yourself to be human. That that humanity is part of expressing your emotions, honoring the fact that you have a body that needs to do these things. You have an emotional heart that has to do these things, not just your mind that thinks these things.
Mm-hmm. Let's move into the leadership position then of somebody who's leading a team, because of some of the examples that you gave there, it makes me think about, first up, there are certain situations, like you said, physical touch might not be appropriate in the workplace in certain settings. You might not have a pet at work, for example, either. Also, when it comes to crying or laughing and doing that together. I know there was a keynote I delivered a little while ago, and we do a pre-event call. I said, one of the questions I'll ask is, okay, are there any things that you don't want to see, don't want to experience in the keynote?
I asked the same question.
And one of the things is, this is literally just a few months ago, they said, last year we had someone come in and do laughter yoga with us, and it was a complete flop.
Oh no.
It just did not, like, for some people it was great, but for others it was just super uncomfortable, and it didn't work as, you know, in a group setting. And so I said, okay, noted on the no laughter yoga. So I guess within a leadership, and when we're aiming to cultivate joy, when we're aiming to build a great culture, something that people really enjoy and want to be a part of, what can we do to cultivate that without it becoming something that people can utilize to, say, complain? Because there's the other version of that, right? If you get too stuck in the cycle, then all of a sudden it just becomes a complaining machine that, I can just vent all my things rather than actually taking responsibility. So just let's talk a bit about this. How can we go about from a leadership standpoint?
There are so many things about leadership, because I think sometimes we're so scared to open the door to complaints because we're not actually great at handling complaints and helping people see their responsibility in that. And so then we cut off all of these other psychological safety tools that we have, and then create the toxicity that we don't want. I mean, that cycle happens just as much as the complaining, the flip side.
Well, let's start with with that from a complaining standpoint. Like, okay, handling complaints. And also then enabling somebody to take responsibility for their part in it, and you taking your part in it as well. How do we go about that?
I think one of the phrases that is used a lot that I think I don't appreciate, I think that's how I'm going to say it, I don't appreciate it, is that if you don't have a solution, don't come to me with it. That advice is out there all the time for employees. Don't come to me if you don't have a solution. And I think that's not very helpful, because there's a lot of times where the employee comes and they're like, this is a problem, but I don't know what to do with it.
I think that'll happen more and more as change continues to ramp up, because there's going to be situations which are completely unknown when it comes to the answer.
We're living in a world that, instead of like VUCA, if you've heard of that, this volatile, unstable, I can't remember. Anyway, Banty, which is brittle, it is anxiety, it is incomprehensible. And those things are what's happening for us. And that's going to happen more and more. And so when somebody comes and starts to, what you feel like is complaining, you first have to check with yourself as the leader. Are they complaining? Or are they pointing out a problem that I don't really want to deal with? And just be honest with yourself about that. And so sometimes when people come to complain, you need to label, well, what's the real problem here? And start doing that kind of like, tell me more about what it is. Like, tell me more is one of my favorite phrases for leaders. Just tell me more. Because you might start to get to the point where it's like, oh, the problem isn't X, Y, and Z, it's purple. And so we need to figure out what that problem is first. And so when you start with the tell me more, like, here's what I'm hearing you say, is this the problem? And find out what the real problem is. Well, if the real problem is something that you're like, that's actually not something we can solve right now, you need to be really honest about that. Like, in my own business right now, I would love to hire somebody to do like marketing for my book. Like, and they just go out and they buy whatever ads and they tell me where to go and they do all the things and they do all the things. But I cannot afford that right now. So the problem is a marketing problem. There's also a financial aspect that goes with that. And so we have to decide, based on our values and our highest purpose of what my organization is doing, how are we going to spend these resources? That's the problem. And so helping us understand what the real problem is that somebody has is important. So once somebody is like, oh, this is the problem, can we solve that? Can we not solve that? One of my favorite questions to ask somebody if they're coming to me is like, if you could solve that, what would you do? How would you want to solve that? And they sometimes don't realize they have that kind of agency because we think we've given it to them. We're like, yes, come to me with solutions. We say that, but then we do other little subtle things that point in a way that, no, I actually don't want you to solve that problem. So when you start to ask them, well, how would you solve that? Oh, I don't think we could do that, but would this be a solution? Oh, I mean, we could do that. Well, what if we did? You start to then problem solve together rather than, if you don't have a solution, don't come to me. That's a very different conversation. So asking someone, tell me more, then finding what the root problem is and asking them, how would they like to solve it? If they could see a solution and you might be able to just do it. You're like, absolutely, we could change that. That is not a problem.
I really like that question because it's just a small level of responsibility. If someone's maybe completely avoiding responsibility, saying, you fix this, you, and it's almost like a complete removal of responsibility. It's a blame of this isn't working and you need to fix it. It all of a sudden becomes you're part of the conversation.
Yes.
And there's an element of responsibility taken, even though you might not be the one that's actually having to completely solve it. You're a part of the solution and coming up with how it is actually going to be solved.
Yeah. And if you implement that, in my experience, this is like this is not a research number. This is like my guess number. About 80% of the time it works. You're still going to have about like this 20% of the time where someone's either complaining, they're just sheer complaining. They're just venting.
What do you do in that case?
Excellent question. So that is where when somebody is like, I was like, okay, so do you need me just to listen? Do you need me to help you solve? Or do you need to talk outside of our conversation? Is this for somebody else? Like helping that person, like, am I the best person for you to be talking to right now? Do you need to go talk to this other person? Directing them back. So I had, starting with somebody, this is not a client, it was a friend. And somebody was on a loud Zoom call in the office and they had their door open and they never use headphones. And she's just like, I can't believe they never use headphones. I mean, they're so loud and we can hear every bit of their conversation. We can hear every bit of the person on the Zoom's conversation. And it's so distracting. And I was like, well, did you go over and tell them? Like, no, I went and told my supervisor. I'm like, oh, I like about lost my mind because I was like, what? And this is a really responsible adult leader. I was shocked that it wasn't like, well, didn't you just want to cross the hall and be like, hey, I don't know if you know, but we can hear every part of your conversation. So do you mind if I shut your door? This is not, I mean, like so anxious that makes people, because what's going to happen? We don't know. And so rather than go talk to that person, they went and talked to their supervisor. And so if I were that supervisor, I would have said, well, hey, do you think that they know? They may not know. Could you go talk to them? So like directing them back to the right person to talk to, I think is really important. And then sometimes somebody just needs to vent. And then at the end, you're like, what would you like to do now? Sometimes I just needed you to know. I was like, okay, is this a problem we need to solve? Or what, or was that it? Actually, I think that was it. It's like sometimes, and because you've gotten so good at the problem solving together, that 20% of the time, okay, like sometimes people just need to talk. HR people experience this all the time. They're always the one that get the tears and stuff like that. Whereas other managers don't always get that. And I think if other managers and other leaders were more problem solving together, how would you like to do this together? We wouldn't experience as much of just one person hearing all the venting and then the problem is too big to solve. Like if we started it sooner, that problem solving together. So in those times, the other question, if you've got somebody who is really avoiding it, like they're just, and another question is like, well, what have you done about this? What have you tried already? Rather than in a, what are you doing about it? But that kind of like, well, what have you tried? Assuming that they've tried something. And then they start to be like, well, I haven't, I don't know. I just think you should solve it. I was like, okay, well, let's talk about some things that you could do first before I get involved. Because if I get involved, it starts to escalate things. Or especially if it's an interpersonal situation, putting that is an easy, gentler way to put the onus back on that person where their responsibility lies. What have you tried? I don't even know. Well, have you tried this? No. Are you willing to try that? Yeah, I'm willing to try that, because sometimes they don't have the idea. But what have you tried is another great question to ask people in those 20% of the time where it does feel like it's outside of it's more complaining than anything else.
For those listening, I think something that's really important to share about everything that you just shared just then, which is extraordinarily valuable in there of the power of questions for one, but how you're actually asking the questions is that you're using great language, but you're also using great tonality. The tonality really matters because the tonality of use, there's a curiosity to it. There's a, hey, have you tried this? Well, what about that? And there's an inviting in versus a, hey, it's almost like a push type of, no, I'm going to encourage you to come in and have the conversation. And so there's a guiding that's occurring there, and it's a guiding to enable the other person to take responsibility for their part in it in an appropriate manner, and for you to take responsibility in your part when there's an appropriate time to do so. So that I wanted to share, which is brilliant. Like what you just shared there, fantastic. How does someone then as a leader cultivate the joy?
Yeah. So besides all of the things that you do as an individual, so the whole, my book, Joyosity, is really what you can do as an individual to cultivate joy. And it will spread over into your work and how you do that. But when I'm working with CEOs, I had a retreat last May with a group of about 10 CEOs, and we were together and we were using the joy ratio. And so what we did is start to map out for themselves, like, what are the things that bring me joy? So like they started to map out their own joyosity, their own joy ratio. What's the toil? What's the thing? And then we started to say, well, what are the questions you need to ask your team? Are there responsibilities that you have trapped into this specific role that actually that team member isn't well suited for? Even if they did upskill, like even if you trained them to do it, it's not going to be the thing that's going to bring them a lot of joy. But this other person, they can.
Let me at it.
Let me at it. Yeah, exactly. So what can you do to help? We call it job crafting, is that like technical HR term. But if you think about it if everybody is more productive when they are experiencing joy, how can we capitalize on that in their roles and responsibilities? And I always like to use the cat box. Nobody likes to clean out the cat box. Most offices don't have a cat. We have 2 at our office, our home. And so somebody's got to do it, So there are those types of jobs. But again, if we're trying to keep toil down to 10, toil's never going to disappear. How do we do that? And so starting to work with these CEOs around that. And then I was talking to one about 3 months later. They'd gone through the process. We'd done it for their team. And they just reordered who did what responsibilities. People still had the same essential roles. There was still the vice president of marketing. There was still the person who was in charge of finance. But there was a few things in there they got to change. There were things that they just were like, why are we still doing this? We actually don't even nobody needs to do this, and nobody likes to do it. So somebody who was there before liked to do it. So they started it and it was great, but it didn't actually hold any purpose anymore. And so that type of assessment of what does my culture actually look like day to day for my people? Because we like to talk about culture, and I love to talk about culture and creating positive culture with complex people, but we don't like to focus on the complex people part that actually creates the positive culture. And so that type of work. And Amy was like, our office is so smooth now, and I don't feel like I'm cultivating joy. It's just around. And that was such a positive, I was just like, that's it. That's how it can be. And she runs a small team, but it is also a multi-million-dollar organization. So they had a lot of responsibilities, and especially to a board. So to be able to show that to the board that we can shift things, we have the opportunity to change things to make it work for who we have. And then it became really clear of what skills do we need to increase? What do we need to improve over here? Because now we've got the setting that is the fertile ground, if we continue that analogy of cultivation, for joy. Now we can figure out, well, how do we do that even better? What do we need to change and shift? And that's in that messy middle part.
Are there certain things within, say, the toil especially, and within the joy that have, the word I'd use is weight to them? And the reason I ask this is there was an example that I did with a client years ago. I was working with the entire executive team, And the CFO in particular was coming up to just some incredible amount of work that he was going to have to get done. I would say overwhelming majority of the stuff was in either the messy middle or the toil. Like it was just the reality of it. No one else could do it. He just had to get it done.
Yeah.
And it was going to mean that he was leaving home before the kids got up and coming home after they went to bed most days. So what we did is I tasked him with go home, have a conversation with your wife, have a conversation with your two kids, boy and a girl. And the question is, what's the thing that you really love doing together, that love to experience together, the thing that means the most to you? And the reason that we did that is because he had very little time. Like when you've got unlimited time, you go, oh, you go do this, you go do that, go do this. But if you can find the things that have weight to them. I think about like within a mix of a song, it has certain weight to them. It fills out a certain part of the mix. Then it enables the song to feel whole and complete. Even though it might, in this case, might only take a half hour, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 hours, but it has weight to it. So is it important to find those things when it comes to joy and toil that have the most weight to them, because they'd almost be like the low-hanging fruit, wouldn't they?
Yes. So there's two ways to look at the low-hanging fruit, the things that are going to have the biggest impact. And sometimes I don't always start there because sometimes people get stuck and it's like, it's too much. It's too overwhelming. It's too big of a change. So that matters. And if you've developed it, yes, what is the thing that's going to be the most impactful? If you did this one thing, it's going to have the ripple effect on everything else. So like you're talking about, the conversation was important, the child knows that they care. I think that's super important. So the weightiest things, what is the biggest amount of toil that if I released it, the scales shift because it's so much of the toil? That's one way to approach it. The other way to approach it is, what is the easiest thing to change? This is just super simple. I now put fiber in my coffee. So simple. I still love broccoli. I still have a lot of fiber from my food, but that scoop of fiber in my coffee in the morning was so easy, low-hanging fruit that really changed some things about my metabolism. Fantastic. Everybody's thrilled. Very easy. And so sometimes we don't always consider that as important. So it can be weighty in the sense that it starts to release something. So now there's more room to consider something else. So those are two ways to approach it. And I think some of it depends on the intensity of where you are. And when you're talking about that situation with that CFO, it sounds like that was an intense season that had a specific time limit on it as well.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think that is also really important because you can do a lot. You can do a lot for like 12 weeks.
Yeah.
After 90 days, it gets real hard. That's no longer a moment in time. That starts to become a new way of time. And I don't love that. So I also try to set those up as experiments of like, what if we did this for a certain amount of time? Try this weighty thing for a certain amount of time. That can also just be a really helpful way to get people out of the fear of the big decision. But the weight is definitely, if you're looking at what makes up this bucket over here, if you're thinking about them as buckets, what's the biggest rock in there that is the most important thing? If you've ever done the rock, sand, pebble analogy, what are the thing I have to put in there first? The other way to think about it is, what is this super easy thing that just, that's, boop, done.
Little speck of sand is like, off it goes.
I got my little dopamine hit, but now I know that works. I'm going to start to build the snowball, kind of analogy. So, mixing all the metaphors, but those are two different ways to approach it. And if you aren't in an intense season where it's time bound, it can be easier to start with that. What's the little thing that I can test this theory out? Because I am sure if you're listening, there are still lots of skeptics out there about, really, Joy, is this really going to make a difference? So start to try it. And I'm like, oh, that did actually make a difference. I can do this. This started to change the way my team worked together. I had really early on in my speaking career, I spoke to a large retirement home community in St. Louis. And so really transient workforce, lots of people working that are minimum wage jobs, lots of managers who are struggling with turnover, and I spoke to everybody. It was the whole crew. And I came back to do a session. I'd done a leadership session, whole crew came back with the leaders. So I came back with the leaders and they're like, oh my gosh, I did this thing that you said to do. And I thought that's stupid. I'm not just going to ask. It was actually tell me more. I'm not just going to ask, tell me more to this worker who is an hourly worker who's just going to quit on me next week. I wasn't going to do it. And I was like, fine, I'm going to do it. And I did. And you know what? I got the best idea from that person about where to put the silverware, where the residents could come in. And I'd never thought of it. It was a huge piece of friction. And I thought it was just this guy being lazy. So all the assumptions, you can hear all those stories this leader was telling. And so sometimes it's just this little simple thing to try. And you're like, I want to do more now. He was like, okay, tell me what you got. And so sometimes I think we neglect how simple little things can build momentum to try something new.
This is so good. Challenging assumptions is a massive piece to talk about, because exactly that. Anyone listening to this, if you're thinking, oh, this can't possibly produce greater productivity, it can't increase performance, it can't do this, it can't do that. And so what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
What if? And not necessarily you are. You can come back to your assumption later on if you like. Just for now, test out something small. And then as you were sharing about, okay, the difference between those, bigger things that are maybe going to have a bigger impact longer term, but are going to take a bit more effort, especially when you're being challenged, it might be difficult to actually execute on that. And that's where you go, okay, for the longer period of time, longer term, look at those big ones, the stuff that's going to have a big impact. It's going to take a lot more effort, but it's going to have a big impact, and see where you could build those in. But if there's some small effort that you can get at least even if it's a small outcome, like what you said, it builds momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And that enables you to go, okay, if I could do that, I wonder if I could do this.
Yeah.
Because if you start with 5 minutes of exercise or 10 minutes of exercise, or whatever the thing is that you're looking to build a habit, a ritual, a rhythm in, then slowly but surely it builds into something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And because if you go, oh, that wasn't even that difficult after all.
Yeah.
And what often happens is that when we challenge those assumptions, that it enables you to get a different outcome. This is exactly what happened with with the person in the team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's surprising at times. And so that challenging of assumptions, then not only challenging the assumption, but actually taking an action that then results in something occurring, that enables it to be a test case.
Yeah.
And go, okay, what else?
And it all starts with story. It starts with internal story. So, what we often think, okay, if I do something different, then I get different outcomes. And that is true. But you choose your activity based on the story you believe about it. And so something happens, we make up a story about it, then you choose your actions, and those actions determine outcomes. And for the most part, obviously, lots of things out of our control.
Well, a great example you just gave them, though, was the person saying, well, I thought that they were just this.
Yes.
It's like, no, not at all.
Not at all. Not at all. So the way he changed his story was, I'm just going to see. So it wasn't even a full, complete story change about, I believe this is to be true. It is, I'm just going to see. And that open-ended curiosity is really powerful. And so when I define curiosity, I define it as a gap in interest, knowledge, or experience that you are intellectually and emotionally invested in closing that gap through exploration. So there's a gap in some way of what you understand, what you know, or what is different about someone else's life. And you aren't just thinking about how to do it. You're also emotionally invested in closing that gap. But it is not through a checklist. It is through, well, let's see. That is where, when you start to change that internal story about curiosity, the tone starts to follow. Now, you can practice tone. I have had to practice tone because I tend to be somebody who has a strong personality. I'm like, we should just do this. And I get really excited, and everybody else does not see it as excitement. They see it as directive, and it falls apart. So I've had to learn how to adjust my tone. But the more I get curious about something, the easier the tone of curiosity follows. And so that internal story change is really important. Sometimes it can be, okay, we're just going to see, we're going to try this. And I think in business, that is one of the hardest things, because we, in many places, well, how do we know this is going to work? What's the ROI? How do we know it's going to work? And I can put data in front of you all day long. My book has literally 35 pages of footnotes, of data, of research that proves, quote unquote, all of these things. But we don't make decisions based on that. We make decisions often more emotionally and based on our own experiences. So if you can just get a little curious about trying things around joy and see what happens, you will start to see, oh, this actually worked. Or you know what, this didn't work this way for me. I actually experienced more joy or more productivity doing it this way. Yes, because every unique situation is going to have variables that I don't know. But the principle of, does it connect me? Does it produce belonging? Is it purposeful? Is it impacting people? And do I feel lucky to get to do it? That stays the same. What it looks like for different people is why it works on a team. So back to that leader who's trying to rearrange their team, it works on a team because we need people who have different skill sets. That's why you have a CMO, a chief marketing officer, and a CFO, a chief financial officer, because you probably don't want them switching jobs. They bring different things. And so if you bring your different joys, we are so much more productive and so much more cohesive. All the things that we talk about that we want at work, innovation, collaboration, creativity, productivity, all the engagement, those are all lagging indicators of saying we're going to focus on joy and our purpose, and then we're going to build from there.
Have you always been a joyful person?
I have always been, I would say, a positive person. And I think that I know I used to be a full-on dealer of toxic positivity. Like, it's going to be fine. It's great. No matter. It's fine. Just positive vibes only and just ignoring the reality. And that's not joy.
Why did you do that?
Some of it is my own personality. So my personality framework, I use the Enneagram as a personality framework, and I am an Enneagram 7. And the Enneagram shows us why we think, act, and feel the way we do. And Enneagram 7's motivations are all around avoiding pain. And so difficult emotions, difficult experiences, if I could just reframe it and be like, it's fine. We're just going to be positive. I could ignore a Mount Rushmore sized problem by just pretending it didn't, it could go away, which denying reality rarely produces good things in us. And so in general could make things work. Like, oh, I could make it work until I couldn't. And I think a lot of leaders find themselves in that place where, like, what got me here, what got you here won't get you there. We hit that wall of like, oh, I can't make this work. I can't either positivity my way in it. I can't bulldoze my way through it. Like, whatever it is isn't working anymore. We have to shift. And I think that moment is when joy really becomes so much more meaningful, because I can choose this. There's an agency in it rather than a pushing or a pretending. There's an agency that happens to recognize the reality.
Where were you, or what was happening, or how old were you when you started utilizing that, say, is it a coping mechanism from a positive standpoint?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always the kid who, so I have literally broken every limb. I was super clumsy as a kid. I was very excitable and grew really fast. So we were joking earlier, I'm only 5'3.5", and I was this tall in 5th grade. And so I was really active. I played soccer. I was a swimmer. I was a singer. I loved to dance, even though I wasn't good at it, and so I was really movie and also clumsy. And so I fell all the time. And I also just pretended it was not a big deal. It's fine. It's fine. I could work my way and beat somebody on a foot race in my crutches. And I was also the kid who kind of laughed when I fell. So there was something about that, I think, that is ingrained in me. That is an ability to see how this could be funny, an ability to see that this could work out. Like, I could see that future possibility. I think that is the great bright side of what I always had. And the shadow side of that strength, that when misused would then deny reality, pretend it wasn't actually damaging when it was horribly damaging. And so I can see all of that at a very, very early age.
Yeah.
Because I think for all of us, the best parts of us are the worst parts of us. Just like you said earlier, the greatest parts of humanity are the ability to think, and sometimes it's the worst part of us, because every strength that we have, when we misuse it or overuse it, it becomes a liability or a weakness.
When did you have the realization then that it was a liability? Because it sounds like there was some great strength in there and great empowerment that you got to experience. And
I'm sure there were moments along the way where I realized it wasn't working and I kind of adjusted. The moment that is the most painful, when I realized how damaging it was to my relationships. For my 40th birthday, my closest girlfriends and I, we all live in different cities. We met in college, and we call ourselves the March Girls, and because we meet in March. And we went for my 40th birthday. We went to New York, and we were walking the Brooklyn Bridge, and it was super fun. And we were just like in this conversation about things, and one of us had a really horrible medical event, and like an ectopic pregnancy, so lost a child in a pretty dramatic fashion and totally unexpected, really, really awful. And because that is so painful, and I really didn't want to experience, I don't like to experience my own pain, let alone somebody else's pain. I was like, well, it's really fine, because you said that you really only wanted a couple kids anyway, and then maybe another time you might consider it. And so by reframing it to be positive, I denied the grief and the pain of one of my longest, dearest, closest friends. And I didn't even realize it, just kept walking the bridge until probably about 18 months later, had a conversation, because I had noticed a distance that I didn't, even though we didn't live in the same city, but we had this kind of, all five of us had this constant communication that happens over multiple forms of text, whatever, phone calls. And she finally was like, this was so hurtful to me. And I'm forever grateful for her sharing that, because it was when I realized that denying of reality, my ability to see the good can't deny the reality of the pain. And so that shifted the way I think about positivity, that there are moments in time to share those things. If I catch myself, my little phrase that I know, if I say, well, at least, like, wait a moment, pause. It's still hard. Like, it's not my natural reaction. Even though I want it to be my natural reaction, it is a learned and practiced skill. My husband is amazing. He could sit there in grief with you for hours and cry with you. And I have to work. Like, it's just a little bit. But I don't think that intentional working at it makes it any less dear or any less important.
Maybe even more important.
Could be.
I mean, or at least on par, right? Because that ability to be able to see an area that is impacting somebody else that you care deeply about in a negative way, and it's impacting what you want, which is a deep and close and beautiful relationship, and the ability to be able to, one, be aware of that, then two, knowing, okay, what I'm actually going to do with that information, and then actually following through with that. There's real beauty in that.
When we've talked about that idea, you're one whole continuous person. Well, once that happened, I started noticing that behavior in all kinds of places. And at the time, I was an assistant head of school, and I started noticing where I was denying faculty, like their experience in the classroom, or just being like, we'll work it out. It'll be fine. Well, at least this happened. It'll be fine. And rather than addressing problems, like, that started to show up, and I could start to see how it was impacting my leadership as well. So this great strength of being able to give us a positive vision of the future when things are hard. Like, I could do that and really envision. But when it came to the nitty gritty of doing, I wasn't as consistent, because I was denying reality, because, well, at least we got this, whatever this was. And so while that is a deeply personal and painful example, that is in the meta idea, wherever you go, there you are. it's going to show up other places for you, which is why when you're balancing things in the joy ratio, sometimes those little shifts that you start to make one place start to make, you didn't know they were weighty in other places too.
We all have upbringings. We all have our childhoods. We all have stuff that we're working through. And most of the time we're just repeating patterns from our early years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And really it comes down to then, okay, are these actually enabling me to get the results that I want or not?
Mm-hmm.
And if they are, rock on, keep going, keep doing it. It's amazing. And if not, then that's your opportunity to take responsibility, as you did in this case. And it's a great example of that. And not knowing that and realizing the ripple effect that's going to happen, because these they go into the different areas of our lives, when to begin with, it was as we talked about, a coping mechanism for you as a child with that you shared about. Then it just goes out into all these different areas. Our brains go, oh yeah, well, that pattern worked. Yeah, we can do it here. 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 And without realizing it, it's impacting us in a negative way. And so I love that that's a real world example of, I love that when we've got real world examples, it enables us to see where else we can grow into.
Yeah. And that's why when I talk about in the Joyosity model, there are several different sections, but in the section about exploring yourself and understanding yourself, that self-awareness piece, the thing I start with is personality, because what you just described is, well, that worked, I'm going to do that again. That's how our personalities form. And so personality isn't something that goes away, but we have to learn how to be aware. I am always going to want to avoid pain. 500%. My husband is an Enneagram 2. He is 100% always going to want to not be rejected. Like, he is going to go for that. And so those messages are going to come at us all the time. That's just how we're wired. But the growing is this working for me? Like the Dr. Phil question, how's that working for you? If it's not, I can change that story and say, well, you know what? I can sit in pain and it's going to be okay. I'm not going to be lost forever and trapped in pain forever. If someone rejects me, I still have love in other places. If I don't win this one time, I am still worthy to be a person. Like those deep motivations of the Enneagram show up in these messaging, in our messages. But the power is being able to see the reality and the truth that you can change. You don't have to accept that message and just let it fly into the true bucket. We just let thoughts go across our head all the time. You have the power to change those things, which then start to change what we talked about, tone. It starts to change your behavior that changes your results.
It really does. Because our ability to be able to, just because you think something doesn't mean it's true.
No.
Just because you believe something doesn't mean it's true. And it's quite likely that it's maybe not true. And at the end of the day,
something else could also be true.
There we go. Yes. Beautiful. And because, we've seen it scattered throughout history. There are so many breakthroughs that have happened. Yeah. And it's because someone else has challenged what everyone else assumed to be true in that moment. And so the continuation of challenging those assumptions, challenging what you believe to be true. And again, just going, okay, is this enabling you to get the results? If it's not, then you have full permission, and you don't even need permission from anyone else. You have full ability for yourself to be able to change your mind.
Yes, you don't need that. In the book, one of the things I talk about is how do you make decisions? Because decisions are a huge part of creating and cultivating joy. They're part of the messy middle. And I tell the story, I'm on the treadmill shouting at my phone, watching The Night Agent. I do love this show. But in the show, all the time, they're like, I had no choice, Rose. I'm like, you have a choice. And so whenever decisions happen, sometimes we just think, I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. Or stories fly up, I don't have a choice. You absolutely have a choice. You can't deny reality, but you have agency to do something with what you've got. And we have no control over the outcomes, actually. We can do our best, and then we have our ability to respond to what has happened to us. There are lots of things. I say it, I would have liked to have learned that lesson another way. I really would have. But being able to recognize I do have a choice, even if it is to recognize this is the choice I'm going to make, even though I don't like it, that agency change shifts the way we have power in our own lives to then choose to design our lives for joy. And so when we challenge these assumptions, a lot of times a super practical work example that we get all the time is, that's not the way we do it. We've never done it that. We haven't. Well, we always do it this way. Yeah, until you changed it. When we haven't actually always done it this way. When's the last time we changed it? Do you still get paid by a check? Do you still punch a card? No, we haven't always done it this way. We change all the time. So, well, we've always done it this way. Well, when's the last time we changed it?
Yeah, well, especially within a workplace, those organizations or people within the organization saying this is where we've always done it, you are going to get left behind rapidly in the years to come.
Absolutely.
And your ability to like build this, cultivate this now, because the ability to be able to continue adapting, the ability to be able to continue shifting, changing, evolving with the times,
yeah,
it's going to be becoming critically important. So I love it.
We first connected because I was coming to speak at South by Southwest.
Sure, yeah.
And one of my friends spoke at South by, and his name's Henry, and he is an AI expert. And one of the things that was so powerful about his talk that I was like, yes, was because he talked about, because AI will change how we work together. It will change the number of people needed. It's not necessarily that we're going to lose jobs whole scale, but that will mean there will be fewer people needed to do certain things, to run a really impactful organization. And when you have a smaller number of people, every little outlier or difficulty is actually magnified because you have fewer people. So what's going to need to happen for the smaller group of people is they will have to be intensely aware of purpose. Intensely aware of purpose. And I was like, yes, because things happen so rapidly. AI changes how fast we can do something. So if you aren't aware of your purpose, that idea that you had, if it goes off the rails, is out the door because AI, which is fine. But that idea that the more human skills will be needed because we will be working together actually more closely is not, I think, how most people think about the impact of AI on our society. But when you start cultivating joy, and so you understand purpose, not only are you more productive, not only are you better collaborator, you are more creative, all of those things that if you don't have those, you will be left behind because it is so incomprehensible and changing so rapidly. You've got to be able to do it.
Yeah, I think about it with the difference between time-based and timeless skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
And time-based is, you're going to need those and they're going to change every month, every week, every day, because it is constantly evolving so rapidly. And then there's these timeless skill sets, the stuff that never changes. Yes, it might shift and tweak as you go because your purpose might change over time. There's new things that you become aware of, but there's a timelessness about it that you build upon. And those, it's a really good way of looking at it, I find. So this has been a great conversation. We have a rapid fire segment on the show called Your Edge. You ready for this?
Okay.
What's your number one value and why?
Connection. So connection is my number one value of my 5 value set because I think connection is a part of joy. Connection is a part of flourishing. Connection is how we create new ideas. As we bring things that are seemingly disparate together. That's part of creativity. And connection between people and ideas and time, what has come in the past to what is coming in the future, what is now. I think connection builds everything that I want to see happen in the world between people, between how we work together. It's a key part of joy. So while joy is one of my 5 values, so is curiosity, flourishing, valor is the last one. Connection is that first filter. Is it connected? Is it connected to the other things that I'm doing? Is it connecting me to people? Is it connecting me to my values? Connection.
Love that. What's a belief that shaped who you've become, whether that be a belief about yourself, about others, or about the world?
This is a new belief for me. So I grew up in and am still a part of Christian culture. And there is a nun. I did not grow up Catholic, but my dad, I was part of a big, loud Italian Catholic family. So I have this kind of extra thing in my world. And about 10 years ago, I read a quote by Maria Weinecker, and it has fundamentally shifted the way I've seen myself and I see other people. And it's just a prayer that she says, and it is, Lord, help me to believe the truth about myself, no matter how wonderful it may be. And that's not how we think often. And that's not how I grew up in that world. But I think that is the most joyful and human honoring way to look at myself, which then allows me to look at others in that way. Help me to believe the truth about them, no matter how wonderful it may be. And that has shaped the way I approach a lot of things.
That's really beautiful. How is it shaped?
Well, I think, first of all, believing that it is okay that I am great at certain things. It's okay that I am wonderful at this. That humility is actually looking at yourself rightly, at not just pretending that I'm not great at something. I spent a lot of years, because I am bright, because I am well-spoken, because I talk fast, and I am a woman, I can be very threatening in certain environments. And so I would pretzel myself to try to say something in a certain way so it didn't offend some, that they didn't think I was thinking too much of myself. So to release that and just be who I am, and allow other people to be who they are, it has been incredibly freeing, and in super practical ways has improved the way I communicate, because I spent so much time trying to obfuscate my intelligence so people didn't think I was smart in some way, so somebody didn't feel stupid. I became a poor communicator because it was less clear. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm okay. I'm not by any means trying to pretend that I'm something that I'm not, but just allowing myself to be in that way. That's a really practical example of allowing that belief to flow all the way through into how I make a request or how I ask somebody a question.
I can imagine there is such a freeing feeling with that.
So freeing.
Yeah, yeah. How about a habit or a rhythm that you can't live without, whether it be something from a daily right out to an annual tradition that you have with family, for example, or you can do both if you like.
Okay, I'm going to give my work example first. Okay. This is a work ritual that has transformed the way I approach work. And I learned it. I learned it when I was a Mary Kay consultant, 30 years ago. It is a shutdown ritual that I call boss at night, employee in the morning. And at night, I write down, it's a more extended ritual now than it used to be. But the core of it is, what are the things that I accomplished today and what do I need to do tomorrow? And I write down the top 3 things that I'm going to do tomorrow. I decide based on all the good things that you use to make decisions, these are the top 3 things I'm going to do tomorrow. And I write them down, not keep them in my head. I write them down, look at my schedule. I see if is that doable in that day, blah, 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 blah. And then in the morning when I wake up, that is what I do. I've already made this. It's not decision fatigue. I sleep better. I know what is happening, and I know it's reasonable in that day. It's not so today I flew from St. Louis. I'm here doing this. I have to go pick up my books for the keynote that I'm here in town for and deliver them to the hotel because, that could only come at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. I am not getting a lot of big work done today, that worky tasks, checking in my email. That's unreasonable. So that little ritual is so important to me. That boss at night, employee in the morning, so powerful. And then I think one of the things that is one of my favorite rhythms and rituals at our house that we are trying to figure out how to do in this stage of family and parenting is having dinner together.
Because your kids are a little older now,
My kids
right?
are older now.
How old are they now?
So we have 23, 22, 20, and almost 17.
Gotcha.
So we have 2 at home, 2.5 at home. I don't know, they're all over. They're in this scattered way. One is thinking about law school in the UK. And so he's kind of preparing for that. We've got one that's not running a camp, but is a director at a camp this summer. We've got one who just got back from studying abroad and she's moving on Sunday back to Nashville where she goes to school. And then we have a high schooler. So, when our kids were at home, we would wait to have dinner until we had a quorum. Essentially, who's all going to be here at a certain time. If that meant it was 9:00, have your snack at 5 because we're going to sit down at the dinner table. Even if you're not eating at that point, we all sat around the table. And that rhythm is so important to me. And right now that we are struggling to make it happen, that it is out of beat. Like, it is really hard for me. And trying to figure out, well, what does that look like in the summer when we've got people floating in and out? There isn't the normal established schedule. How can we at least for 15 minutes come together? And figuring that out is really important to me. And
why has it been important to you?
There's a whole host of reasons why. One is connection. Like that. When I talk to people about what has always been true for you, I call it the golden thread. I think connection has been one of my golden threads. I loved doing that. I loved sitting around. That's when conversations happen. They're more casual. We've tried the different things about low, high, low, or high, low, high, like all these different things we've tried. But it is just the spontaneous reconnection at the end of the day that is so important. I am Italian. I cook to show you love. So there's something about sharing a meal around a table that enriches the connection. It gives you something to do with your hands when things get awkward. You talk about things of the day. And so it was really important when our children were young to establish at least that touch point. And I mean, when they were really little, we all ate breakfast together, like stuff like that, but like one time during the day. And so I think those traditions that my family did, I grew up Sunday afternoon, was with my dad's family. My mom's family didn't live in town. And so that was a tradition. It always evolved and revolved around a table. And so coming together, and that the table is where we belong, where you have that sense of belonging. I think that you get to be here. And I joke all the time. We have 2 cats. One cat is allowed at the table now, and allowed is generous because my daughter pulls up a chair and I'm like, he can't be like, she's 17 almost. And still it's like, he's over here. He doesn't get to sit at the table for real, but he belongs. Like it's a part of, he's been around for 10 years in the family or more, 15, I guess, he belongs. So I think there is that belonging around a table that connection at the end of the day brings, even if it is on Sunday nights. I didn't used to cook. I was like, I cook for you 6 days a week. I'm not cooking on Sunday nights. But it didn't matter what it was. If it was cereal and apples, we're sitting around the table, and there was nourishment happening in both ways, emotionally, physically, intellectually, in all the ways, I guess, not just both. But that is why I think that around the table is so important to me.
Do you make sure that technology's not around? Do you have any hard and fast rules with that? Or
I
not?
do. Sometimes I am the only one who enforces them.
Okay.
I obviously wear an Apple Watch. And so I don't necessarily put it on Do Not Disturb, but I don't get a ton of notifications on my particular watch because I've just set it up that way. So it's okay. But yeah, we are technically not allowed to have phones at the table or technology at the table during that time.
Yeah.
So when they were young, they had to ask to be excused, and you couldn't be excused until everybody was finished eating, which was torture to the fast eaters and the slow young eater, the youngest one, who is still a very slow eater. So we try to make that a technology-free space. Every once in a while, if we start talking about details of the day and like, oh, we need to find that information, we'll be like, do you want to get your phone and look at it right now, or can it wait? Like, we have that negotiation, but it is, a hard and fast principle, I would say, that we don't have phones at the table.
Yeah. Around the table, growing up, we had that as well, where Dad, there was some times when Dad wasn't home in time because he was out on the farm.
Yep.
But yeah, there were specific spots that we had at the kitchen table. It's weird to me now going back to the farm and people sit in different seats at the kitchen tables. No, like everybody sits in their seats, right? And so but there was conversation also with Australia. We get this from England originally, with sitting down with a cup of tea, and you have a cuppa. In Australia, we call it a cuppa.
Absolutely.
And you sit down and it's conversation. The other one was, which I'm massively appreciative of, my Auntie Lee and Uncle Bill. My uncle passed away a few years ago. My auntie is is still going strong and amazing woman. And both of them remarkable humans. And they had happy hour. And so every single time that we would see each other, which would be a couple of weeks a year usually, they'd either come down to us or we'd go to them. And around, I think it was 5 p.m. for an hour.
Yeah.
It was, you'd have a few little nibbles. They'd have a cup, like a glass of wine, for example, or something like that. And growing up, we got to witness. It was where we came together. It was where the conversations happened. And yeah, when Uncle Bill passed away, I asked Auntie Lee, we just had a moment to ourselves and just asked her, what are you going to miss? And she said, I'm going to miss happy hour.
Yeah.
Because it was a time that they, even when no one else was around, they came together and had conversation. And after whatever had happened during the day, and they were able to come together. It was beautiful to witness. And just the value of conversation. So the question I've got for you then, before we jump into this final piece, is how are you going about that when everybody is in all these different places? How are you managing that?
It's funny. We have been talking about this for about the last month. And our pastor has done this great series about parts of the day and the two different kinds of time, which I love because culturally in America, most of the Western world, we think about time as very linear. Time is linear, and that's Chronos time. And then there is a Kairos time, which is a seasonal time. And so I think farmers in general, I work a lot with ag. We talked a little bit, like they kind of get that you can't plant, you don't plant in October most of the time. I mean, there are some things you do, but not for large crops, there's a time when the ewes are born. There's a time and you shouldn't expect it other times. And so that is sometimes separate from the linear time that we experience. And so we've been talking about, well, how do we make those meaning times? Because Kairos is meaning, seasons, meaning. How do we create that where we are right now with the reality of our lives? And some of that is going to back to the very beginning of our conversation, this idea of establishing a new rhythm, establishing a new discipline. I would like to keep continuing working on this social media post for my coaching program so people know that it exists and you can join the Joyosity Core Advantage, or my book is out there, or I have to finish editing this keynote that I'm giving or whatever. I want to keep doing that. But the meaning right now is actually, I need to go spend this short amount of time. What is the value that I'm living by? Both of these are important and need to be done. How do I, in my linear world, create the meaning that I want? And that's the conversation that we've been having. And so do we need to set some alarms? And it's at 3:00. Like it's at 3, we're just going to pause in the middle of the afternoon. Anybody who's home, kind of like your happy hour. And we also, because we both have studied in the UK, I studied in Oxford in college. And so we both have tea in the afternoon as often. And so do we want to have that connection time like we did when the kids came home from school, because we were together and we had a moment together? Do we need to establish that again? Even though they're not, it's a different way of thinking about it. What does that look like? How do we communicate that with the other people who live in our house, with children and who are adults, who are near adults? We would like to spend time with you. Here's why that's important to us. How can we make this work together? So these are the conversations that we've been having. And in all transparency, whenever I talk about rhythms and rituals, it is never 100%. It's never 100% of the time. There are some streaks that I do. Yes, I will move my body every day. But figuring out, well, how do we connect? I mean, I think we've done it in the last month or 3 weeks that we've been talking about it. We've probably done it 3 out of the 5 days of the work week, trying to establish that. Do we have a time where we've connected every day? All 4, 6, whoever's home of us, I would say it's probably 90% of the time, but we're still working on it, figuring it out, especially when you're in a family where you don't have all the control anymore. Not that we ever had all the control, but it's a lot easier to have a toddler sit down, than it is to have a 17-year-old who has a car and has their own work responsibilities and friends they want to see and things like that. So it's more who are we as a group that we want to continue to be as we continue to transition away from young kids at home into having adult family. What does that look like? It's a lot of conversation. So does that answer your question?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
I love how intentional you are being. Thank you for being intentional, not only for yourself, but also for your family and those that you're coming into contact with, because it really matters. It really does.
Yeah.
And so thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for this amazing conversation.
Yeah,
It's so great.
How can people go to find out more? How can people grab a copy of the book? All the things.
Yeah. So the best way to find me is jennwhitmer.com. So Jenn with 2 N's, WHIT, M as in Michael, ER. And then the book is at the top. Keynote speaking is at the top. Coaching is at the top. Social media, I'd love to hear what people think. So my little challenge for you is I did tell you lots of different things to try. So I would love to know what the nugget is. And if you wanted to post about it, tag the edge of possibility, the edge of possible. I almost called it possibility. The edge of possible. Tag me. I'd love it. I play the most on LinkedIn and Instagram. So at Jenn_Whitmer on Instagram. I have a TikTok. I'm over there sometimes. Sometimes I'm on Facebook. I definitely have a YouTube account where it has my podcast. It's also on Spotify and all the places. You can also get that at the website. So Joyosity podcast. The Joyosity book is Joyosity: How to Develop Intense Happiness in Work and Life, even if things are what they are. And if you go to jennwhitmer.com/books, it has links to Barnes & Noble and Amazon and Target and all the places to find it easily.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you again for coming on the show. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. And for those tuning in, we'll have everything that was mentioned linked in the show notes at cameronatlas.com/podcast. We've got some great new guests coming up, so make sure you hit that follow button, leave a comment, and until next time, go and write the next line in your story. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on The Edge of Possible.